Great. Well, it's just 2 minutes after, so let's kick off them again. Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for making the time to join the webinar today. We have a great topic for you today with a lot of great discussion and talking points about risk and security in multi-cloud. So of course, our title is Are You at Risk in a Multi-Cloud Network? I think we know the answer to that. Top network security blind spots revealed. I am Brian Woodworth. I am a principal solution strategist at Aviatrix and former Azure Black Belt for networking and security. So I'm bringing that angle and color to this discussion. And I'm joined today by a good friend and colleague of mine, Karthik, who will introduce himself.
Hey folks, this is Karthik Balachandran. I am a Senior Director of Sales Engineering here at Aviatrix. Quite a few people on the call. It looks like an important topic, so let's get right into it. Folks, in the next 40 minutes, you're going to hear from Brian Woodward. He, as a global black belt at Microsoft, has had a front row seat of all the horrible customer experiences around cloud networking and network security with the CSPs and such. And he's going to take you through some of these blind spots and, more importantly, the consequences of these blind spots for enterprises. Then we'll get right into how to make cloud network security an enabler of cloud journey and not just a gatekeeper by implementing some pragmatic guardrails. Like, for example, scaling your next generation firewalls in a multi-cloud world. How do you do threat detection into the network? And finally, we'll also talk about visibility and auditability of your cloud networks. Actually, there are many more topics. This is a quick summary of the kinds of things we'll talk about, lots of great details. So look forward to your participation. And finally, all this cannot happen without talking about the business impact that you will deliver by implementing such a cloud networking strategy in your enterprise. And because this webinar is your time to get your topics and questions out, please use the Q&A box, not the chat window. Use the Q&A box to ask your questions, drop in topics for discussion, and pick Brian's brain, pick my brain. Together, we've done thousands of these implementations, and we'd be happy to answer these questions live or answer them on the chat, depending on the question. Now, before I hand it off to Brian, I would like to introduce Aviatrix to you. Take 30 seconds for those of you who have not heard of Aviatrix. Aviatrix customers are from just about every vertical on the planet, right? These are iconic brands that have already picked Aviatrix as their strategic cloud network security partner, and they're using Aviatrix in production as we speak. There are hundreds more that are not represented here. Many of them are Fortune 500 companies, and that's put Aviatrix in this market leader category of leading this very important category of products. Now, I do want to say, because of this deep expertise in implementing network security in public cloud world, that nothing we're going to talk about today is slideware. Everything we talk about today is actually running in production in thousands of VPCs, hundreds of implementations in production over the years. So anything you find interesting, feel free to engage and we can get you moving very quickly. Now, with that being said, let me hand it off to Brian to talk about his top network security blind spots.
Cool. Thanks, Karthik. So as we know, cloud is wonderful, right? And it's changed our industry and it's enabled a lot of progress and innovation, especially at the application and workspace area. But it's not without its detractors and its challenges. And as we know, a lot of these are in the infrastructure and security space. I did a piece on LinkedIn about this, an article about how cloud is a little top heavy in the application presence, and their security DNA is evolving, but not necessarily at the speed at which your business needs to evolve. So you can go to that article and kind of check that out. But I've identified today 4 avenues or swim lanes of challenge and risk in the security space as it pertains to cloud at scale and multi-cloud in general. The first is that native security stacks are not sufficient. So, let me qualify and quantify that concept a little bit. The cloud native security stacks do work well within a specific ecosystem. They are kind of integrated into the fabric of the cloud, and it's a cloud native approach that can help people accelerate their business. But on the other side, they have no presence or familiarity with an on-prem security stack, and then across multiple clouds, this difference becomes even more exacerbated. They have different ways of implementation, different features, different management motions, which can present a lot of challenge to a business that's wanting security to be consistent and agile and not get in the way of progress. So what happens a lot here, and also of course the app awareness tier really isn't present, up the stack, full stack awareness in these native security stacks. They tend to be based on transport and IP 5-tuple logic to a degree. So what happens is that, as we know, practitioners bring in the virtual appliances that they know best. They're trained up on them. All of their applications are already compliant and well fit and finished into these virtual appliance ecosystems. So they bring in or extend that virtual appliance capability from either another cloud or on-prem or wherever, and make that the centerpiece of their cloud security engine. And this solves a set of problems, but creates another, right? One is that you're not truly cloud agile in this way. These security appliances have varying degrees of compatibility with the cloud fabrics from a management perspective and a data plane perspective, right? So we end up increasing a lot of cost and blast radius because we create a gravity well where we mess with routes statically, usually, which doesn't scale well, to get traffic into these appliance tiers. And then they can be cumbersome and difficult to scale. So this introduces a lot of risk, and really was, as a black belt, was one of the focal points of design, and would slow down cloud adoption, because we had spent a lot of time getting these virtual appliances to work correctly, to scale correctly, and to be resilient. And it was never a perfect solution. So the next one is this lack of consistent visibility and control. And what I mean here is that, as cloud is built out, this is happening at a very fast speed that's much different than on-prem, right? It's all, even if you have a private cloud, on-prem cloud is faster, yet still there's more hands there, there's more tools there. Multi-cloud provides a bigger ecosystem that is harder to scope and manage end to end and see. There are a lot of different organizations and lines of business that want to build into the cloud, and it's not uncommon for them to get ahead of IT and security. So security is in this reactive stance, gasping for air, trying to remediate lines of business that are pushing forward. So of course, sprawl and shadow IT can creep in, and then this generates a lot of risk in a couple of ways. First, it's just compliance, right? If you're going through an audit, you're going to be sweating bullets that these new deployments that have rushed into cloud at the speed of business may not have been buttoned up correctly or dovetailed into your existing security system, and you might fail an audit check. But even more concerning is lateral movement, right? So if we've got the lack of visibility and consistency across this big cloud space, and there's always churn and movement, that east-west axis of attack is ripe for bad things to happen. And there's a lot of concern about lateral movement. Again, this tremendous focus on that area and trying to remediate. Another really important challenge area is that internet exposure in cloud is omnipresent, right? If we need to kind of remember what cloud initially started for, AWS, the W is web services, right? Maybe today it could be ACS, Amazon Cloud Services, but early in cloud's existence, it was more about agile DevOps development. And for those folks and those workloads, internet exposure was great because it was typically an internet first experience. So in each cloud networking stack, as we know, if you spent time in cloud, the internet is just right next door. So it's a very thin veneer between your workload, be it PaaS, SaaS, or IaaS, that you're containing privately, and the internet, right? Because the design is different. Where traditionally in networking, we know our DMZ, it's a very stable ironclad place, and then we build concentric rings of access around that DMZ, and apps are deeply buried within the middle. In cloud, we get into what I call DMZ hell, where every virtual instance is practically its own DMZ, right? And that doesn't scale, and that opens up a lot of increased surface area for threatscape. A lot of data loss prevention goes in there. And this is something that requires a whole different kind of discipline and focus, and frankly is just not intuitive from an existing security perspective. Finally, as we know, CSPs are big multi-tenant places. They're really good at a lot of things, but it's a shared space with a lot of businesses. So there's some sacrifices in visibility and sacrifices in mean time to resolution because these clouds need to service lots of customers at once. So, they present you with these managed solutions, these PaaS solutions and SaaS solutions and so forth, but they are black boxes, right? The infrastructure and the stacks are being controlled by the CSPs. A lot of it is shared amongst other customers, and it takes time to debug if there is a problem. The mean time to resolution can take a hit because it's not just your network, it's the cloud's network. And so you can be left holding the bag in terms of what you owe your customers and their trust in your platform and brand. So now what I like to do, just to have some fun and gain a little more insight across the board, is for you to just quickly, if you don't mind, answer this poll here, which is which one of these 4 challenges is most pertinent or top of mind to you in your business motion to cloud. And hey, if we didn't hit the nail on the head, or there's something that I kind of missed, feel free to recognize that in the other column, and then bring it out, tease it out in Q&A. I'm here for you. This is super informal. We would love to hear from you so we can have a nice fireside chat. So we'll give you just another 30 seconds. And then we will share the results of this soon so we can all talk about it and collaborate.
Lots of great results coming back here.
Yeah, looking good. Interesting to see the one pulling ahead.
Very insightful.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on and share the results. I don't know how this works as the end user perspective, but I'll just read through them. So 23% of you said that the deficiency in the native security stack was a problem. Over half of you, 55%, said, man, it's that lack of consistent visibility and control, that sprawl and shadow IT that's really causing me concern and heartburn. The internet exposure, interesting, is 9%, isn't as a danger zone for some. And then the fabric is a shared responsibility, and that difficulty troubleshooting and brand impact was just 11%. So it looks like the 2 big ones are that native security stack management piece, and the big one is that lack of consistent visibility control, which is great because we're going to talk more about that head on. So, all right, Karthik, tell us what's going on.
Excellent. So, folks, that was very insightful. Thank you for that response. So let's talk about the enterprise cloud journey so that we can put this in context as we start to talk about how to remediate these risks. Because going to the cloud, it's a journey. It's hard. It is constantly changing and iterating. So most enterprises will start organically in the cloud, where there are a few networks starting with some developers that are innovating with new applications, and they will pick their technology of choice. They will either build it on VMs, they'll use serverless functions, pass links, or they might do containers, Kubernetes. They're going to pick their DevOps tools of choice to go build these innovative next generation applications. And when enterprises start to take control of that environment, all the risks and the issues that you folks identified on this webinar and Brian talked about are present, right? The lack of visibility, the omnipresence of the internet everywhere, the shared responsibility, which means no responsibility model. By no responsibility model, what we mean is the CSPs say, if something goes wrong, don't call me. Okay, you built the application, it's your problem. This is no way to actually scale the business. In spite of all odds, your developers continue to scale painfully in this environment. And now the center of gravity becomes the cloud, and there's more innovation, there's revenue generating applications in the cloud. And guess what? They're same issues. And you're constantly fretting, losing sleep over this. And there might be things happening in your network today that you're not aware of, and you wish you had the control. And what ends up happening is sometimes security teams mandate injection of agents or scanning of all EBS volumes. But unfortunately, the developer technologies don't always accommodate for that kind of oversight. Right now, where enterprises really want to get to is this multi-cloud world. And by the nature of your responses on this session today, it just seems like you folks are here, where your business will take you to the clouds and the regions of their choice, where the users are, where the applications are going to run best, and they're going to go pick their platforms for innovation. And we, as the security networking team, need to be able to take control and secure this environment, right? And the issue not only is present, it's actually worse than before, because the constructs that AWS uses is completely different from the constructs that Azure uses, completely different from GCP, Oracle, Alibaba Cloud. It's almost like these CSPs came together, colluded to make sure that you are not successful. And they present so much complexity. And that is exactly what you folks pointed out by saying the lack of consistent visibility and control is a big issue for you. So this is the problem statement. And when we meet our customers, we meet them somewhere in this journey. And over the thousands of conversations we've had with various enterprises, when we ask them, all right, so what would you like to see ideally in your cloud network and security? And they come up with a few recurring themes. The first one is, oh, surprise, I want end-to-end visibility, control, and auditability. I need to be able to control and audit my environment, who changed what, when. Then they talk about threat detection capabilities in their cloud network. They enjoyed this on-prem. They had a DMZ, they had their firewalls and all the applications behind it. In the cloud, they want similar capabilities without getting in the way of innovation. They want other pragmatic guardrails like cloud network segmentation, which is table stakes for any kind of compliance. My production network should not speak to my dev network. Great. It's hard to do it in one cloud. How are you going to do this in a multi-cloud world, right? Then you want to be able to automate and use infrastructure as code philosophy to actually build this environment out. Why? Because you want to move at the speed of business. You want to move at the speed your users and your customers are expecting you to move. So automation becomes a huge part of this strategy. And oh, by the way, all this needs to be multi-cloud native. I don't want a product from 1994 installed in my cloud, introducing extra complexity on top of all the native constructs. So this needs to be a multi-cloud native, something that understands the different cloud constructs, that can provide me a consistent architecture and operations. Okay. Now, before I jump into exactly how you can get there, and that's the million-dollar question, how do I get to implement all of this? I do want to quickly point out that analyst firms like Gartner, Forrester have started recognizing Aviatrix as the market leader, and they prescriptively tell you that if you're looking to solve for networking and security issues in the cloud, you should shortlist Aviatrix. In fact, recurring recommendations from AWS, Azure, GCP, and the CSPs as well, and even HashiCorp has picked Aviatrix as their go-to partner for multi-cloud networking and security. So with that, let's talk about what does Aviatrix do that makes us the market leader in this space. Aviatrix lets you implement a secure cloud network. What does that mean? The Aviatrix controller is a piece of software that takes control of your native constructs and programmatically leverages them to implement your end state. So no more guessing and making 15 different configuration changes for one thing. The controller takes control of your VPCs, the VNets, the UDRs, the route tables, and all the native constructs and brings them together so that you can start to do other things on top of that. Then the controller is able to build advanced networking security functions on top of each cloud, on top of these native constructs. And what this gives you is a super set of security capabilities. All the things you want to do is built into the solution, and you start to turn these capabilities on in one cloud and then extend them to the other clouds as you deem fit, as your business demands. Okay, so that is a quick introduction to what the Aviatrix controller can do. The other component, the software component you see here, is the Aviatrix gateway, the red circles. And what the Aviatrix gateway is a lightweight unit of service that lives in your VPCs and VNets, the revenue generating critical, mission critical VPCs, VNets. And this gateway is able to do security services, service insertion, give you the visibility you're looking for, consistent visibility, the load balancing and failover that you want across AZs, across regions, across cloud failover technologies, and intelligent routing. So this is a powerful little device that runs in a B series or a T3 micro, T3 small VM. Oh, and by the way, these gateways are fully managed by the controller, which is what you would expect from a cloud, a multi-cloud native solution, where you are not having to configure anything, not just the native constructs, but the Aviatrix gateways themselves are fully managed by the controller. In fact, most of your operations folks won't even know that these gateways exist. They will just enjoy the benefits of these various capabilities.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I just want to chime in on that too. It's easy to look at this topology and say, well, gosh, isn't this just more NVA, sprawl and more virtual machines that I have to manage? And really, that's not the intent of my arc of security and cloud. I want to become more cloud native and more agile, and I'm really trying to embrace cloud operational models. Well, we've definitely embraced that spirit wholeheartedly, and it's really hard to kind of talk about. It's more best just to see a demo or get hands-on experience. But the controller really is key here, as well as Copilot, which we'll talk about, which gives you a ton of visibility. But we're building this and managing this for you in a very similar way that a lot of the native mesh capabilities of clouds like NCC or vWAN go, right? Under the covers, these cloud native mesh platforms are very similar to Aviatrix in terms of their design capability, right? It's gateways that you don't deal with very much, and a centralized control mechanism or a GUI or shell or Terraform injection point to allow you to automate and scale. So this is all about the controller and total line of sight, and less about worrying about micromanaging these little gateways, right? That is not the intent of the platform. You express intent into the controller. We have cloud native awareness about that intent because we pick up these cloud native objects that are so critical, that are all networking security based, and then we execute on your intent.
What a great way of putting that. Yeah. And exactly, intent based. And the centralized intelligence that comes with it. There's some awesome questions on the chat, and I would love to bring them up. And I promise we'll talk about this during our session here today. So what does this give you? So the first thing that stands out, it's evident, is that the way you do network security in AWS is the same as the way you do it in Azure, is the same as you do it in GCP, and pick your cloud and it'll be exactly the same, which is huge for enterprises that are looking for that consistent architecture, consistent security posture in every cloud. So when you talk about the superset of security capabilities, it's not a science project, and you're hoping the person that built it does not leave the company, right? So that is no way to run a business. Aviatrix solves for that in a very efficient manner. So let's talk about threat detection. So now that I have this consistent security posture and architecture, what can I do with it? One of the many capabilities is your ability to insert firewalls, third-party next-gen firewalls in the cloud. Most customers enjoyed the benefits of this on-prem, and they had these advanced security and threat detection capabilities, and they no longer want to use that security stack on-prem. They want to bring that security intelligence closer to their cloud applications. Aviatrix gives you a turnkey next-gen firewall insertion solution for your public clouds. So the controller implements this in a seamless way. And most importantly, these firewalls are a scale-out firewall. So it's a group of firewalls that the enterprises can decide to scale out or shrink based on the the dynamic nature of the cloud, really. You really cannot predict, oh, I will need this much throughput. There's only 5 VPCs you need to worry about. You'll be at 50 VPCs in 6 months, right? And we know all this changes pretty fast. Oh, and by the way, it's in a different region. How are you going to support that? Well, you've got the consistent architecture able to scale out or scale down based on the demands of the business. And Aviatrix has invested in product integration with all the major next-gen firewall vendors. You see some of these logos here, which means there's end-to-end intelligence, awareness, and correctness. Remember the Aviatrix controller that is providing you this intelligence and the orchestration and the visibility that you need across this data plane? the same controller is now taking care of inserting these firewalls, policy-based networking in and out of these powerful firewalls that you have installed, so that you're taking away all the networking overhead on these next-gen firewalls, reduces your cost of how many firewalls you need, and in fact lets the firewalls do what they are good at, which is security, threat detection, IDS, IPS, etc.
Yeah, excellent. Just to weigh in here too, the idea is a better together story, right? We're trying to protect your investment. We know that these inline firewalls still perform a very valuable function for a lot of you, right? Because of those gaps and challenges we discussed earlier. But let's be honest, at a multi-cloud lens and at that scale, some of these firewalls are difficult to orchestrate or integrate, right? And again, as a black belt, we spent a lot of time just trying to get that pattern right. And there's different patterns or recipes across these vendors. So even if you operationalize and get the pattern for one cloud down, now you've got to go do it again in a different way for another cloud. So you end up with this management mix that's always diverse and hard to deal with. But FireNet is cool insofar as you get a single source of truth for management and scale, right? You express intent into the engine about what you want your firewalls to look like. And what we're going to do is follow those best practice or cloud adoption framework CAF capabilities that we've partnered with the CSPs on to integrate and scale those firewalls into these HA topologies so that you can move on to more important things. And I think that's a really powerful part of the feature set. So thanks, Karthik, for letting me jump in there.
No, absolutely. And there's a bunch of questions in the Q&A tab, lots of great engagement. Let's get to that as well. And to adding to what Brian just said, this common scale out group of firewalls can be used for internet egress, internet ingress, or even east-west inspection. So instead of trying to solve for all these different data flows in 3 different science projects that are non-operational, Aviatrix has already built that into the solution. So although egress and ingress are completely different animals, there is prescriptive guidance on exactly what you should be doing, and it's all done through the controller, either through Terraform or through the UI, and it's predictable and repeatable. Some enterprises also want to firewall data flows to on-prem or multi-cloud. I only want to firewall when I go outside my cloud boundaries. These are all granular policies that you can implement using this solution. It's probably the most sought after solution at this point, and customers and enterprises are pleasantly surprised and benefit a lot from it. The other thing to think about is, now that you have this all-seeing data plane, you've got these powerful gateways that are adding value and security to all your cloud networks, and you have this all-seeing data plane. The data plane can detect communications to known bad actors. Aviatrix controller will subscribe to a feed of known bad actors and actually alert you on any malicious activity that's going on, and will automatically remediate it by setting a rule in that network to quarantine your compromised host. So this is huge, because when customers have this omnipresent internet issue, and developers are building load balancers and automatically egressing out or ingressing using without appropriate security measures, there's a lot of room for this kind of activity to develop in your environment. In fact,
Karthik, I'm so sorry to stop, but we've got some great questions bubbled up in Q&A, and I want to get to them before we get too far, because I want the answer to still be fresh for them and in my mind.
Let's do it.
Let's knock out 2 or 3, because this is great, man. We're getting exactly what I want, like really pertinent questions.
Fantastic.
Okay, so Balaji asks, how do we break on iPremise IT orgs to adopt and adapt to cloud and virtual network mindset to prevent clients from creating ground networks in the cloud? I mean, it's a great question, right? There's no simple answer and there's no holy grail right now, but I will say the way, from my experience, and I'm just one person out of, a whole group of experts, and, I'm not going to have the gold-plated answer, but from my perspective, it's about moving at the same speed or getting proactive against these application teams that are pushing out in cloud. So if we can give you tools that allow you to offer security and networking integrated that gets out of the way of business but gives you the visibility you need, that argument about, hey, you should adopt cloud and you should adopt it in a cloud native way becomes much more easy to have, because they have less to push back on and say, well, yeah, it's a 22-week journey. So we polled some of our customers while I was in Azure to learn, while we were developing the CAF body of solution, what the average onboarding time for a big migration project was. And the average was 22 weeks. And why? Because usually the networking security piece was the long pole in the tent. It took time to educate. It took time to optimize. Sometimes we had to backpedal the application and retrofit it, right? Because things were getting ahead. So anyway, that's, in a nutshell, that's my answer. The more agile and kind of transparent we can make networking security for the application owner, the less of an argument you have to have about, you should adopt this cloud mindset, because they can just focus on the application, which is really what it's all about. Okay, we have another person who asks, I'm unable to fathom the role of Aviatrix controller in inserting a next generation firewall in public cloud. Let's say, for argument's sake, if there's only one public cloud. Yeah, that's great. So Karthik, maybe you want to take a stab at that too, but I would say, as public cloud scales, even if you're just in a single cloud, which is today the exception, not the norm, but totally viable, right? Or maybe you're 5% in one other cloud or something. As that footprint increases, again, every time you need to insert or grow a firewall pair or any NVA pair, it doesn't have to be an NGFW, it could be a WAF or a IDS IPS or an ADC or whatever. It tends to be a tools down motion, right? It tends to be, okay, man, we need a couple days to scale out and prove out the stamp, to make sure it's integrated correctly, to run our recipes right, to smoke test it. And it just gets in the way of the business motion, right? No one wants to take a work window to deal with firewalls. And it's fine if you have one firewall pair. I mean, it's almost a non-event, but in my experience dealing with enterprise as cloud accelerates, it's never just one firewall pair. In fact, what tends to happen is enterprises will have one firewall for east-west, one for north-south, and maybe one for corp. So each new stamp or line of business that you put in there requires 2 or 3 firewalls, and it's just not scaling. So the point about FireNet is that, again, it's not going to solve world hunger yet, but it's a powerful tool in the toolkit to operationalize, if that's a word, and manage firewalls in a much more uniform way, which helps reduce that tools down period. So Karthik, did you want to add to that?
No, that is very well put. But 80% of the enterprises that start with Aviatrix start with a single cloud. If you are managing 5 VPCs and do not plan to grow, then great. Maybe the person that built it will retire in the same enterprise and you'll be just fine. But most enterprises have a dynamic environment. People move on to other things within the company, or they get hit by the AWS bus, which means there's such a skill shortage in the industry. And somebody built this environment and nobody knows how to manage it. It's no way to run a revenue generating business. And that's why they look to Aviatrix to solve this, even for a single cloud. And somebody on the chat is also saying that these issues are getting in the way, are actually having a revenue impact on their business. And we hear that all the time. This is awesome. Should we do a few more capabilities and then continue answering questions?
Yeah. Let's pick it up and then we'll get more as we go. Thanks.
Yeah. So this capability of building threat detection into the network is called ThreatIQ with ThreatGuard. Make sure when you reach out to Aviatrix, make sure we demo this to you. Every time we turn this on in our customers' environments, we see cryptocurrency mining going on. We'll see Tor server connections and bot activity. You're basically paying the cloud bill for this unapproved activity is basically what's happening. Why is that? Because the lack of security controls and visibility. Exactly what you folks pointed out in the beginning of this call. And then let's talk about something a little bit more basic, like network segmentation. Okay, I've got a few VPCs, VNets, and I've got a few different regions, maybe single cloud, multi-cloud, but I want to be able to group my production VPCs into one security domain. That's the term Aviatrix uses, which means all my production networks can talk to each other because they got production resources, microservices, and databases that should be accessed across the production network. Makes total sense. But that should be isolated from my development and sandbox environments that our developers are innovating in. And I do not want to jeopardize my production environment. How do I keep this isolation across regions, across accounts, across clouds? And finally, I might actually have shared services that has to speak to dev and prod, but should be isolated from someone. These are granular policies you can implement in the controller, and the controller, being the intelligence of the operation, is going to push these policies down to the gateways, which enforce these. So you can design and enforce multi-cloud segmentation policy. You get to visualize the policy you've implemented. So if your business comes around and asks for a change and says that we're going to move this production VPC out of here, we're going to move this to some other place, you can quickly make those changes through the controller, and it's not a science project trying to reverse engineer what you've done, hoping that you've done it right. Okay, this is predictable execution on your network segmentation strategy.
Yeah, and that science project piece is so well put, Karthik, insofar as not to pick on any one cloud or any one solution, right? Just to be kind of agnostic about it. But the big mesh capabilities and engines or platforms that that are available in public cloud today offer to some degree a similar capability of segmentation, but to do so requires, getting out the wrenches and turning a lot of bolts, right? It's not an intent-based motion yet. I mean, maybe they'll get there, but it's a lot of static manipulation around tables. Trust me, in Azure, we would spend probably too much time on this. Again, not to call anyone's baby ugly. That's not at all what I'm about, but it's just, man, that's not really what a good end-to-end mesh segmentation solution should offer you. So with Aviatrix, it really is point click, as some people say, push button, receive bacon. It's not instantaneous, but within minutes, you can set up this kind of policy because our engine is cloud native and it's going to set up all those routings for you based on the intent. You don't have to go in and do surgery and correct yourself multiple times. Oh God, did I put in the correct route statement and these static route propagate, associate, all this. And finally, this all extends to the branch, which this slide doesn't show, but that's another place where I think we offer something unique and interesting that may not really be present at whole in the market at this level. So these two branches we have here, branch A and branch B, can totally get folded into this entire segmentation play. You could have blue branch that goes to blue, you could have red branch that goes to red, and then you could decide if they need to talk to each other or not, or if they both need to go to purple. And it's literally just point click, boom, 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 boom. And that experience is from my standpoint very liberating. So thanks.
Absolutely. Okay, and getting into the biggest topic that you folks pointed out was the end-to-end consistent visibility and auditability. Now that you've got a consistent a posture, a consistent data plane and security plane, now you can benefit from the visibility and the auditability of this environment. You can look at every flow in your network from anywhere to anywhere, end to end, and look at the ports being used. Your developers will tell you all your data is being encrypted in motion, and so you can actually look at the ports being used, the services being used, the source destination, filter them, get to the bottom of threats quickly. There's also a capability of going back in time to look at every change that was made by who and when. These are requirements that were posed when folks are on-prem. Like, these requirements did not go away just because you went to the cloud. These are mandatory capabilities that you should have to operate a business critical application in the cloud. And Aviatrix just lets you do that and scale in the cloud effectively. I'm just teasing you with some of this stuff. Imagine all the things you can do with this all-seeing data plane, like anomaly detection and everything else. So give us a call and we can talk about many, many more exciting things. Also, there's consistent automation. Nobody wants to be building this out through the UI, especially in a very dynamic environment. Aviatrix is the go-to partner for HashiCorp when it comes to multi-cloud networking. There are other webinars and content around that topic. So you can use a single Terraform module to orchestrate, build your multi-cloud or single cloud network security at a moment's notice. Okay, so no longer do you have to do a science project and code everyone differently, which really, honestly, nobody wants to do. Well, who wants to have 5 different Terraform scripts and trying to maintain them in addition to everything else that you have to do, like putting out fires and such. Okay.
You want to pause and do a few more questions?
Yes.
Yeah, great. They keep coming in. All right, so
Let's
Jay asks, how does the controller manage communication among the VPCs? Karthik, you have a lot of experience with VPC and AWS in general. You want to take that one?
So when you say among the VPCs, you mean intra VPC, correct, Jay? So anyways, I guess that's what we're talking about. So there are many patterns, folks. For example, different cloud providers have different capabilities around what they can do intra VPC. Azure VNets tend to have much higher capability. So our gateways are able to monitor more of that within a VPC or a VNet, I'm sorry. But for AWS, it is less so. And so when you talk to AWS or any CSP, they've started to advocate segmenting your applications by VPC. So that's actually a longer topic to answer. So Jay, it would be great if we can take that offline and we can start whiteboarding some solutions that other enterprises have come up with.
Great, Ramesh, that's a really cool question, and I think I'm going to try to answer in the spirit of the question, but it's it's kind of hard sometimes to understand the angle, but I'll take a swipe at it. Do you deal with custom silicon of router switches to make it inline processing at hardware level wherever the vendors provide APIs? I think there's a couple different answers to that question, but I think the spirit of it is, first of all, are you able to take advantage of hardware acceleration techniques of the CSPs, right? Because they do have these things. Either it's DPDK, where we're doing a very open source Linux focused way of optimizing packet processing in the hypervisor, and that's exposed, or more commonly hardware acceleration, right, where these CSPs have their custom special FPGAs that do packet and flow offloading. And the answer is yes. And any CSP, if the VM SKU that's on our menu supports hardware acceleration or DPDK, we're just going to natively use it, which is part of that recipe of how we get such incredible line rate encryption. Now, there's more to it too. I don't want to gobble up too much time. A lot of it is that we have, and I feel that we're unique in this way, but I don't want to overstep my bounds, the ability to process cryptography and IPsec across multiple cores per tunnel, which is a very interesting capability. This is even more profound when we do have a hardware device. It's the only one in our portfolio that's an edge device called Cloud In. And when you accompany this with our transit gateway or other provider transit gateways, we can get line rate encryption for big plays like Direct Connect, Express Route, and so forth. So I hope I answered the question correctly.
Yeah, that was great. And in fact, there are multiple questions on how to change mindset. What an awesome topic. I can talk all day about it. How do you break the client's mindset about treating cloud security architecture like it's on premise? That's fantastic. And there was another question very similar. What you're really asking, okay, before I jump to that, let's get to that topic. So with consistent automation and all the benefits we just talked about, our customers are reporting real business value. And of course, you're able to accelerate your cloud journey. You're able to gain control and visibility, which improves your reliability. Imagine what that means for all your SLAs and the requirements for servicing your customers appropriately. It reduces the business risk, and you can actually sleep at night because now you know exactly what's going on in your cloud network. And a big one that people don't talk about as much and actually don't even think about is the skill gap and talent gap. And this is the question that everybody's asking on the chat, on the Q&A box, is how do I change the mindset? It really starts with the skill gap. When somebody has gone through their IT journey in a certain way, the operations folks versus architects, the DevOps folks versus the more traditional IT folks, everybody's gone through the journey. They come with the experiences, they come with their discipline, and they come with their priorities. And these priorities don't always meet, right? The security folks want to have inline inspection and things of that nature, and the DevOps folks go, what? Why do you need that? My application's taking care of that. And there's conflict, there's friction, which further slows down. And like someone said in the discussions going on, they said this actually affects my time to revenue, which is a huge thing. With Aviatrix, you can actually bring the traditional discipline of the IT around security and visualization and visibility and efficiency, and marry that with the agility of the cloud and the cloud native nature and the speed that you want to move with your users demanding that kind of speed, and you're able to bridge these skill gaps. So the security folks can do what they need to do, networking folks can do what they need to do, and the DevOps folks can do what they need to do. And this bridging of skill gaps is huge, and you cannot experience it until you experience the product. I cannot say enough. I'm from Aviatrix. Obviously, I'm biased, but I encourage you folks to come to a build session, which we will have. We're going to, there's a little bit more information 2 slides down, and you get to experience the product firsthand. And I'm going to put the link to that shortly. Okay, great. I'm going to hand this back to Brian to close this out.
Cool. Thanks. All right, I'll build out the slide and then I'll answer 2 more questions, because again, this is for you. I want to stay laser focused on your needs and what's happening in your headspace, but we'll get through these 4. So conflict resolution, problem, risks, positive outcome. This is us turning lemons into lemonade, or hopefully, right? That's the intent of this slide, based on some of the amazing things that Karthik has been discussing today, or maybe not amazing to you yet, but interesting and noteworthy at least. So we talked a lot about the native security stacks not being sufficient and the cost of blast radius and scale that the network's next generation firewalls can incur. We hope that FireNet, again, not world hunger, it's not going to fix that overnight, but is a great way to accelerate and optimize that strategy. So if you can manage these at scale and get better insight into when and where you need them and how to deploy them, that really helps alleviate that risk sector. The big one, lack of visibility control, sprawl shadow IT. Again, when you fall out of compliance, you got lateral movement, you don't know what you don't know. We address that with the secure cloud networking end-to-end capability. There's a bunch of different pieces of that Karthik was helping to unpack, but to summarize, when you have total visibility with a consistent architecture, you start to gain a foothold on this and move from a reactive state to a proactive state. You've got great visibility with Copilot. You've got a network that you own. We'll get into that a little bit later as a single tenant experience, because Aviatrix is controlling this for you and just you. You've got the ability to keep up with the speed of business, because Aviatrix, with that central operational model, you talk to it via Terraform as a single provider, you feed it intent and it scales for you, allows you to keep pace with this. And so, for example, if a customer says, listen, I need 3 new VPCs to light up this line of business, you're in that conversation now, because we're a multi-account. When you go to AWS, you add accounts and you add lines of business, and they all fall under your umbrella, and you say, got it, click, click, click. Aviatrix builds these 3 VPCs and embeds the security policy that you need at that time. And then you can continue to remediate. And then, of course, ThreatIQ gives you that intelligent ability to turn what you don't know into something you do know right away if there's a threat coming in or coming out. And then if you want, you can auto remediate against it, which keeps you in that super fast lane. Okay, moving on. Okay, the internet exposure is omnipresent. This is just another facet of that ability to have an end-to-end network that you own. I mean, the best place for network security, folks, is the network, right? It just is. And, it's cool to push it out to other functions, but really, if you're going to keep up with the application owner and make sure that you have as close to total control as you want to control network security in the network. You don't want it to be, off the reservation in some other portion of your cloud deployment. And again, the most secure network is the one that you own. And so that is part about this network correctness and ownership, this single tenant experience in a multi-tenant world, because the overlay that we provide is your overlay. We give you that visibility through Copilot. end to end. I mean, just go to YouTube and check out some Copilot videos. It's pretty impressive. So we also provide a lot of data about network correctness in your overlay, how fast it is from any one gateway to any other gateway, real-time metrics on round trip times, loss, all that stuff. So it really helps you troubleshoot quickly. We are definitely not in the business of black box.
Hey,
Okay.
Brian, and it's my turn to interrupt you.
Oh, please. Yeah.
There was a very important, actually, I have my favorite question. It says, thank you. This was a great presentation. You exceeded my expectations. So great. Thank you for that. But the question was, what is the traffic path when two production workloads across clouds want to talk to each other? Is it via Aviatrix? Okay, fantastic. It's a very important point. Aviatrix is not a hosted solution. So the architecture diagrams that you saw, the gateways and the controller live in your VPCs. They would traverse your VPCs and they will traverse the path you give it. For example, if you've got Equinix Cloud Interconnect, it will traverse that private link. If you want to go over the internet through a high performance encryption, it can do that. So there are different ways to architect this depending on your priorities and requirements. So that's a great question, but just remember, Aviatrix is not a hosted solution. It's in your environment under your control. You just license the software from Aviatrix. And there's a question on pricing, and we can take that offline. Okay, we talked about business value and this. Brian, I had a quick question that popped up here. So in the absence of Aviatrix, right, how are customers solving for these requirements?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's a variety of approaches. If I were to kind of water it down or simplify it for the sake of discussion today, I see two approaches, and they both have their pros and cons. Okay, but it was always a pros and cons. It was never a cake and eat it too. One approach is, as we were discussing earlier, the native stacks are something that I don't want to learn or master yet. I need to move at the speed of business. I'm going to use them selectively as possible, but not in a comprehensive cloud native way. What I'm going to do is extend my existing security solution from on-prem or another cloud into this new space, into this new cloud, because it allows me to quickly ensure that I'm scoping my applications under the same compliance capabilities and auditing capabilities that they used to be on-prem. But then again, the downside of that is you're managing virtual machines as a pets versus cows, as a pet's way, not a cow's way, right? And that gets in your way. The other one is to try to embrace more cloud native, cloud capable security solutions. So then that was the other end of the scale, where customers say, we're really trying to get away from firewalls. That's just not where our business model wants to go. We want to be fast and agile and do more infrastructure as code, and even roll out, operationalize security networking as code too much as possible. But what happened here more often than not was security people would come back and say, yeah, but look, we're going to leak data. It's all governance based now. So it's the things I create in cloud that are cloud native aren't just about what VLAN or interface or network segment it's on. That's all shadows and dust, right? We're in a layer 3 world now. It's about what rights and privileges I give a specific user or tenant to do things. So if I have NSGs, do I yield that to the dev team or the application team so they can self-serve? Do they have to come back and cut a bunch of tickets to me? Do I templatize it and try to make it pristine through a library of templates and blueprints? And then, that's just really difficult to operationalize. And that's where things leak through, right? If you deploy one networking space without the right governance model, then there's a breach, because developers don't know. They're focused on the application. That's their job, God bless them. So they go in and build. But what they didn't know is while they were building a virtual machine, they put a public IP on it. So what do? Security people just throw out their hands and say, I want all internet traffic to me. We saw this all the time. It's called forced tunneling. That's how we called it in Azure. I'm sure there's compatible names in other systems. But you inject quad zero monolithically through every cloud deployment as a seatbelt, belt and suspenders safety measure, like Hail Mary, like no matter what, I own internet, which works to a degree, but it's an anti-pattern, right? Because what you're doing is sucking all that internet out of cloud. You're dealing with the latency and the hairpinning. This wreaks havoc on PaaS to IaaS relationships. So if I've got virtual machines that need to talk to big databases, storage things, PASI things. It's got to go back on prem and then back to cloud because that's all public. And so there's a tremendous amount of effort to mitigate that and deal with that. So again, pros and cons. Hope
Fantastic.
that was a good answer.
Yep, yep, and it's great hearing it from a practitioner like yourself. Great, folks. But I promised you guys that there will be there'll be information on a hands-on lab workshop. We call these build sessions. It's very much in demand, so please make sure you register early. And if you have any other questions that we were not able to get to on this call, please email us at info@aviatrix.com. With that, we will end this session. Look forward to hearing from you folks.